An old letter to America written by Osama bin Laden in 2002 has been trending on social media. TikTokers have been sharing their shock after reading the letter and thinking bin Laden was right. Now, this is upsetting a lot of people who feel like this is another symptom of wokeness taking hold of our youth, but perhaps it's just kids tired of seeing endless American wars without anything to show for it. Let's go ahead and watch this mashup of some of the TikTok videos that were being made.
And actually, before you even read the letter, I did want to mention, in reading the letter, I could only think of this tweet that I saw the other day. Under settler colonialism, any kind of resistance is branded as terrorist because the only acceptable violence is violence by the occupier. So please keep that in mind when reading the letter.
We really need to stop paying taxes because they ain't doing nothing but messing up everybody else, and America is the bully. And it's sad because they have brainwashed us to think that we was the best country on the planet, when in reality, we're the worst fucking country in the planet.
It is just insane because this letter is so well written and so reasonably structured in an argument. Like, you got to present your findings, you got to state your cause, all of that. Like, everything he said was valid.
Okay, not everything he said was valid, but we're going to go over some of the letter. It is the letter is important, and it was written by Osama bin Laden in 2002 because it showed why the attack happened. And it's important to always know why, rather than just thinking, oh, this just happened to us because these people are evil, and that's just fundamentally what it is, and we have to just go and eradicate all of them, right? Usually people have a reason for committing violence, unless they're actually just insane. So we're going to go over some of this letter. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just parts of it. It's important to mention, first of all, that The Guardian had published this letter and had it up on their, it had been out there in the ether for a long time. But then once this went viral on TikTok, they actually, when it went viral on TikTok, they ended up taking this down. And so this is archived. We had to go back in the Wayback Machine in order to get this. I also have to note that TikTok has removed, when I tried to do a search for Osama bin Laden on TikTok, I ended up getting a screen capture that said, we're not, what did it say exactly? Let me tell you what it says. No results found. This phrase may be associated with behavior or content that violates our guidelines. Promoting a safe and positive experience is TikTok's top priority. For more information, we invite you to review our community guidelines. So TikTok is censoring this information. They don't want people to be searching for all of these videos that are going viral on TikTok. The Guardian took that article down. And so there's a lot of censorship now going on about this particular trend. But it's important to know what happened in history and why it happened in history. I think these types of texts, to completely eradicate things like bin Laden's letter to America, or any of the writings of Hitler, or any of these, or any of the people in the past who've committed atrocities, you'll never learn. I mean, how are we ever going to learn? How are we ever going to not only learn how we could have prevented these types of things, not saying that these events are anyone's fault, but just saying that usually there's something that happens that gets to that point. And so this is how we learn, is by hearing from these people. But also, we can actually help prevent radicalizing people and getting them to the point where they want to commit atrocities, or they have so much hate towards another group of people. So let's go over the letter. So he starts off, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Permission to fight against disbelievers is given to those believers who are fought against because they have been wronged, and surely Allah is able to give them, believers, victory. That is in the Quran 22:39. So pointing, first of all, to, we're allowed to attack you because you fought against us, and we've been wronged, and so we are allowed to fight against you. That is when the Quran allows violence, is what Osama bin Laden is pointing out. You can't just attack, but you can attack if you've been wronged. So he goes on to say, some American writers have published articles under the title, "On What Basis Are We Fighting?" These articles have generated a number of responses, some of which adhered to the truth and were based on Islamic law, and others which have not. Here we wanted to outline the truth as an explanation and warning, hoping for Allah's reward, seeking success and support from him. While seeking Allah's help, we form our reply based on two questions directed at the Americans. One, Why are we fighting and opposing you? 2, what are we calling you to, and what do we want from you? So those are the pretty basic questions you'd want to know if you've been attacked is, why did you attack me, and what the hell do you want from me? So that is what Osama bin Laden says he's going to be answering in this letter. And again, I'm reading this to you because there's definitely a lot in this that I find if any of these younger people have read the entire thing, I would hope that they reject quite a bit of this. That would be my hope. I don't know if they just read parts of it because parts of this defend the Palestinians and parts of this are accurate. Parts of this are true for sure. But a lot of it is also very frightening. And that's what happens when you get into these desires to rule based on morality, based on religion, that oftentimes results in some radical ideology. So he goes on to say, as for the first question, why are we fighting and opposing you? The answer is very simple. 1, because you attacked us and you continue to attack us. Okay, so that's pretty simple. Yeah, if we're attacking you, then that's why you're attacking us. So he's saying we're attacking you back. He says you attacked us. So he gives off where we attacked him, where the United States attacked, where whoever we are. And I think when he says we, he means the Islamic world. So he's saying you attacked us in Palestine. You attacked us in Somalia. Under your supervision, consent, and orders, the government of our countries, which act as your agents, attack us on a daily basis. You steal our wealth and oil at paltry prices because of you, international influence, and military threats. This theft is indeed the biggest theft ever witnessed by mankind in the history of the world. You have supported the Jews in their idea that Jerusalem is their eternal capital and agreed to move your embassy there. So that's interesting because Donald Trump, so this was written in 2002, obviously way before Donald Trump, but Donald Trump came to power and then he did actually do the one thing that many previous presidents did not do, and that is turn Jerusalem into the capital of Israel, which was a highly, highly controversial thing to do. It's something that really only should have been done in a two-state solution where both sides were given parts of Jerusalem as their nation's capital. So this is one of the things that Osama bin Laden cited. You've supported the Jews in their idea that Jerusalem is their eternal capital and agreed to move your embassy there. It says these tragedies and calamities are only a few examples of your oppression and aggression against us. It is commanded by our religion and intellect that the oppressed have a right to return the aggression. So he's saying if you're oppressed, you're allowed to fight back. So that is what is, and I think that's actually kind of common, I think, belief amongst people in general. If you are being attacked, for example, in your own home, we don't agree with murder. We say murder is wrong unless somebody's trying to hurt you, in which case you do have a legal right in this country to kill them. You actually can murder a person legally in this country under the right circumstances. You have to be attacked and have a threat against you in order to kill another person, but you can't do it, right? So he's saying the same thing, like the oppressed have the right to return aggression. It says, you may then dispute that all of the above does not justify aggression against civilians for crimes they did not commit and offenses in which they did not partake. And then he's going to give us the arguments as to why American civilians can be attacked, and gives this justification. Now, pay close attention to this because this is the same exact argument that we're seeing in Gaza right now. The argument that we can kill innocent civilians in Gaza because of very much the same reasons Osama bin Laden gives as to why he could kill American civilians. So this is what he says. The argument contradicts your continuous repetition that America is the land of freedom and its leaders in this world. Therefore, the American people are the ones who choose their government by way of their own free will. So we chose this government. So you chose them. We hear that all the time. They voted for Hamas. They're the ones who let Hamas in. He says a choice which stems from their agreement to its policies. Thus, the American people have chosen, consented to, and affirmed their support for the Israeli oppression of the Palestinians, the occupation and the usurpation of their land, and the continuous killing, torture, punishment, and expulsion of the Palestinians. The American people have the ability and choice to refuse the policies of their government and even to change it if they want. So again, it's your fault, America. You voted for this. You supported this. You continue to support and give a bunch of money to Israel. And we see that. We see a lot of people out right now. The debate is, and this was in 2002, over 20 years ago. And yet the debate even today, 20 years later, is, do you support Israel or how dare you support the Palestinians? A lot of people say if you support the Palestinians, then you're anti-Semitic. You hate Jews. And he's saying, yeah, so you Americans support this occupation and oppression of the Palestinians. And you also choose your government with your own free will, and your government bombs us and they continue to wage war in the Middle East. And so it's your fault, civilians, your vote. Says the American people are the ones who pay the taxes, which fund the planes that bomb us in Afghanistan, the tanks that strike and destroy our homes in Palestine, the armies which occupy our lands in the Arabian Gulf, and the fleets which ensure the blockade of Iraq. These tax dollars are given to Israel for it to continue to attack us and penetrate our lands. So the American people are the ones who fund the attacks against us, and they are the ones who oversee the expenditure of these monies in the way they wish through their elected candidates. Now, in the case of Hamas, I mean, this is the argument that's being used right now against Palestinian civilians. And in their case, they haven't had an election in almost 20 years. The majority of the population in Palestine are young. They didn't ever vote. And yet they're being punished, killed, not just punished, they're being killed. They're being massacred for a choice they didn't actually make. We have elections in this country every 2 years, every 4 years for federal government, 2 years for members of Congress. So we're constantly voting. We're constantly voting. Now, we could debate whether or not you think your vote counts. We could debate whether or not you think there's true democracy in the United States. But from an outsider's perspective, we are voting a lot, and we are voting in this government. And this government is then committing atrocities under our name, under our flag, under our banner. So he goes on to say, also the American army is part of the American people. It is the very same people who are shamelessly helping the Jews fight against us. The American people are the ones who employ both their men and their women in the American forces which attack us. This is why the American people cannot be innocent of all the crimes committed by the Americans and Jews against us. Allah the Almighty legislated the permission and the option to take revenge. Thus, if we are attacked, then we have the right to attack back. Whoever has destroyed our villages and towns, then we have the right to destroy their villages and towns. Whoever has stolen our wealth, then we have the right to destroy their economy. And whoever has killed our civilians, then we have the right to kill theirs. Now, I don't agree with that at all. But, it's his reasoning. And a lot of people do share that reasoning in the United States. I mean, he's not alone in his thinking. I don't agree with that. But plenty of Americans, as we've seen recently with this the current war happening in Gaza, is they believe this. They believe that, look, Hamas did this. They attacked Israel, so Israel has the right to attack them back. They went and they destroyed villages in Israel, so Israel has the right to go and destroy cities and entire cities and blocks and neighborhoods in Gaza. So there are plenty of people in this country who agree with Osama bin Laden. Funny enough, the same people who are criticizing the TikTokers for then agreeing with Osama bin Laden. If they really were honest with themselves, they would find that they themselves also agree with Osama bin Laden on a lot of this. In fact, they probably have more in agreement with Osama bin Laden than the TikTokers when we get on further with this. And I also want to point out that he does mention Jews. He's not saying Zionism. He's not saying, he mentions Israelis here and there, but he mostly says Jews. And that is something that many of us who are critical of what Israel is doing in Gaza, we say Israel or Israelis or Zionism, to be very specific, because most Jews do not live in Israel, and many, many, many Jews are not Zionists, and they do not support Israel. Or if they are Zionists, they're not this type of radical Zionists. They have a different Zionism ideology. There's a lot of different Zionism is a ideology that has many different thinkings and forms and radical sides and mild sides. And of course, there's plenty of prominent Jews who are speaking up against what is happening to the Palestinians. So many people are very careful to not conflate the two, Jews, Israelis, or Jews with Zionists. But I will say that, and now in this, he is clearly conflating. He's saying Jews. And that creates anti-Semitism when you blame it on an entire group of people. But I will say that if you just flip the script, it's happening all the time to Islam. So people will say, it's Islam, Muslims are doing this. We have to fight Islam. We have to fight. And they're lumping and conflating these really radical factions of Islamist ideology with the vast majority of the Muslim population. That conflation is happening all the time. And it's not nearly as spoken up about. So people don't say Islam, say Salafist Islam, or say specifically Al-Qaeda, or say specifically ISIS, certain particular ideologies. Salafi ideology, perhaps, or Wahhabism is probably a really more accurate term for the types of radical terrorism that we see. And that's a very radical form of Islam that the vast majority of Muslims do not practice. But we see that conflation all the time. So I just want to point that out. And no one says, hey, well, we do hear people say it's Islamophobic, but we don't hear it in mass like we do when it comes to conflating Judaism. And in fact, what we don't see inside of the Muslim communities, we don't see Muslims in general saying, hey, an attack on, if you're going to call out Salafist, Wahhabist, radical terrorist Islam, you're insulting me. You are an Islamophobe. You're an Islamophobe. If you criticize them, you're criticizing me. If you criticize Saudi Arabia, you're criticizing me. We don't see that conflation at all in the Muslim or Islamic world. We do see that conflation when it comes to Judaism and Jews and even secular Jews and Israel. And that is why it then gets conflated. That's why it's so dangerous. It's dangerous for even those who are very pro-Israel to be making this conflation, because then it does end up conflated and you end up with people like Osama bin Laden just citing it as Jews as the problem, or Adolf Hitler. It breeds the anti-Semitism. That is the conversation that I had with Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, which you could watch. That episode. It's excellent, where he makes that argument that this type of the Zionism and the conflation of people and the people who are pro-Israel conflating it is causing anti-Semitism is very dangerous. So Osama bin Laden goes on to say, also the American army is part of the American people. They are shamelessly helping the Jews fight against us. So this has been much of the problem in the Middle Eastern world, is they view the onset of modern day Zionism and the establishment of Israel as a state in the Middle East. That Jews were largely very protected and lived peacefully in the Middle East up until the creation of the State of Israel. That is when things got really tense in the Arab world. And the reason is because they looked at their Jewish population and they worried that they had dual loyalty. They worried that they were going to go run off to Israel, or that they were going to spy on behalf of Israel, because they viewed Israel not as a safe haven for Jews or a home for Jews. They didn't view it like that. They viewed their own states, their own countries as home for Jews. In fact, Iraq fight tooth and nail to try to keep them until they finally made a deal. But, and right now, even to this day, Iran has a very large Jewish population that is considered a protected minority inside the state of Iran. But when the state of Israel was created, they didn't view that as a home for Jews. They viewed their own countries as homes, just like we have here in America as a home for Jews, perfectly safe here, even though it's not a majority Jewish nation. They viewed Israel as little America. They viewed it as an American military base that popped up on the Middle Eastern shores, and it was very, very threatening. They viewed it the same way that Russia views Ukraine, and the encroachment of NATO into Ukraine, and how NATO kept expanding and expanding and expanding right onto their borders. That's how the Middle East and those Arab countries viewed Israel. They were like, oh great, American nukes right here on our shores, pointed at us. We can't have this. And they're getting Jewish people to do their dirty work. They're recruiting them. They're bringing them in under this false pretense of this is your home, this is where you belong. And they're going to bring them over there, and they're going to turn our own people against us. That's how they viewed it. It wasn't an anti-Semitic issue. It was an issue of an American base with nukes has shown up on our shore, and they're out to get us. So that has to be understood in the understanding of why so many Jews were expelled, or why many of them ended up pulled. There was a big exodus of Jews into Israel once the creation of the state happened from all these Middle Eastern nations. And it was a mixture of expulsion, a mixture of deals that were struck with nation states, and also a mixture of Israel enticing them. So he goes on to say, this is why the American people cannot be innocent of all the crimes committed by the Americans and Jews against us. Allah, the Almighty, legislated the permission and the option to take revenge. Thus, if we are attacked, then we have the right to attack back. Whoever has destroyed our villages and towns, then we have the right to destroy their villages and towns. Whoever has stolen our wealth, we have the right to destroy their economy, and whoever has killed our civilians, we have the right to kill theirs. So he says, as for the second question of what we want, so that's why we're attacking you, because you're attacking us. That's why we're attacking you. But what do we want now from you? What the hell do we want you to do? Well, he says, the first thing we want you to do is to convert to Islam. Now, this is what any group that is saying that they're doing what they're doing for a higher purpose, whether it be Islamic purposes or Christian purposes or whatever the purposes are. If they claim they're doing it under the banner of God, their goal is to get you to come to God. That's what they're wanting, right? They want you to convert. They want you to see it their way and join them in their calling. And so that's what they're first saying. First thing, we want you to join Islam. Okay. It says the religion of the unification of God. He said, it is the religion of showing kindness to others, establishing justice between them, granting them their rights, and defending the oppressed and the persecuted. It is the religion of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil with the hand, tongue, and heart. It is the religion of jihad in the way of Allah, so that Allah's words and religion reign supreme. And it is the religion of unity and agreement on the obedience to Allah and total equality between all people without regarding their color, sex, or language. Okay, as you're bombing people, as you're killing people, you say this. Same thing for Christians. I mean, you got the Crusades, come to God. This is the way God wants this. God, we are a peaceful people, as they're slaughtering people. We see this all the time with Christian radicals that bomb abortion clinics. Like, we're doing what is right, and then they go and murder people, all in the name of peace and prosperity. When a person feels a calling and they feel like God has spoken to me, or this is what God wants me to do, I am a battle warrior for God, and they really, really believe that, it can turn often into this radical ideology that turns into a person thinking they're an actual warrior. So he goes to say, the second thing we call you to do is stop your oppression, lies, immorality, and debauchery that is spread among you. We call you to be people of manners, principles, honor, and purity, to reject the immoral acts of fornication, homosexuality, intoxicants, gambling, and trading with interest. So no sex outside of marriage, gay, drinking and drugs, no gambling, and no interest, doing deals and charging interest. We call you, that is like principles of Islam. We call you to do all of this, that you may be freed from that which you have become caught up in, that you may be freed from the deceptive lies, that you are a great nation, that your leaders spread amongst you to conceal you from the despicable state to which you have reached. It's saddening to tell you that you are the worst civilization witnessed by the history of mankind. You are the nation who, rather than ruling by the Sharia of Allah and his constitution of laws, choose to invent your own laws as you will and desire. You separate religion from your policies. So again, there's a lot of people in a lot of religions that want to rule by their religion. They think that the word of God is the last God, the law of the land, and that's what it should be, that the world is God's. God created it, and so therefore he should create the laws. And a lot of people, myself included, believe in a separation of church and state. But he's saying, no, this is what makes you an infidel. This is what makes you an abomination. You need to go back to the law of God. He says, you are the nation that permits usury, which has been forbidden by all the religions. You build your economy and investments on usury. You are a nation that permits the production, trading, and usage of intoxicants. You permit drugs and only forbid the trade of them, even though your nation is the largest consumer of them. You're a nation that permits acts of immorality, and you consider them to be pillars of personal freedom. So interestingly, these are the types of things that conservative states in America have also tried to ban or have successfully banned. I come from a conservative state of Idaho. You cannot, you can only buy liquor in a state-run liquor store. Marijuana is not legalized, not even for medical reasons. They're also saying immorality. Plenty of states had homosexuality, like I guess gay marriage, right? Well, actually, I think there were states that tried to actually ban homosexuality, right? They tried to say if you're caught, then you go to jail. Like that stuff that's forbidden. Or gay marriage certainly was something that had been up until recently something that many states did not want to allow. So there's a lot of conservatives in this country, and that's what's so interesting about this, is that many of the conservatives are railing against the TikToker, saying how dare they read this letter and agree with some of the things Osama bin Laden says. Well, if they read it, they might find they actually agree with some of the things Osama bin Laden says. Just you could cherry pick some parts of it and other parts, depending on who you are. So he goes on to say, you forget your President Clinton's immoral acts committed in the Oval Office. After that, you did not even bring him to account, other than that he made a mistake, after which everything passed with no punishment. Is there a worse kind of event for which your name will go down in history and remembered by nations? Well, France has had a few of their own scandals, but then again, look at France. Look what's happening in France. There's like a rising up of conservatism against France, saying that they've become kind of this hedonistic and just like a hedonistic society. And that's what he's basically accusing the United States of being, as a hedonistic society. So he goes on and says, your nation does all this bad stuff. You spread diseases, you have way too much sex, you destroy nature with waste and gas more than any other nation in history. Saying, so you pollute. Your law is a law for rich and wealthy people who have their sway in politics and fund your elections with your elections with gifts. And they say that, and behind them stand Jews who control your policies, media, and economy. So he is being very anti-Semitic in his letter here, pointing at one group. Which, again, if the tables were turned, I just want to point this out because I think it's an important thing to point out, that if what we're seeing right now in the media or in conservative media is this fear that Islam is going to take over. Islam's coming. Islam's taking over. They're showcasing the protests for the Palestinians and saying, this is what happens when you let in too many immigrants. Our culture is shifting and Islam's taking over. If you inserted the word Jews into that, it would be anti-Semitic. So what makes it okay then to say it's the Muslims or the Christians? It's the Christians. They've taken over, the Christians. But we do say this. We actually do say Christian right wing is taking over. The Christian fundamentalists are taking over and they're trying to control all of our laws. But it's when you say it about one religious group in particular of the three Abrahamic religious groups that it becomes extra. But I just want to point that out because I think it's important to just point out the hypocrisy on that. Either we can say it about all or we can say it about none. And we have to remain consistent on that. That's my stance. Now, we can debate which it should be, whether we should be able to say it about all or none. I'm not having that debate right now, but I'm just saying it needs to be consistent, whatever that end result ends up being. So he basically just goes on and says, you guys are war criminals. You shamelessly ask that, you ask for criminal courts for others, but you then grant yourself immunity. You are the last ones to respect the resolutions and policies of international law. Your policy on prohibiting and forcibly removing weapons of mass destruction to ensure world peace, it only applies to countries which you do not permit to possess such weapons. The freedom and democracy that you call to is for yourselves and for the white race only. As for the rest of the world, you impose upon them your monstrous destructive policies and governments, which you call American friends. Yet you prevent them from establishing democracies. When the Islamic Party in Algeria wanted to practice democracy and they won the election, you unleashed your agents in the Algerian army onto them and to attack them with tanks and guns, to imprison them and torture them. A new lesson from the American Book of Democracy. So goes on, it says you bombed Japan. So he goes, you dropped a nuclear bomb on Japan. You say that you want to destroy weapons of mass destruction, but then you drop a nuclear bomb on Japan, even though Japan was ready to negotiate at the end of the war. How many acts of oppression, tyranny, and injustice have you carried out, O callers to freedom, he says. So he says you're war criminals. You guys claim to be the last vanguards of human rights, and your Ministry of Foreign Affairs issues annual reports containing statistics of those countries that violate human rights. Or all these things vanish when the Mujahideen hit you, and then you implemented the methods of some of the same documented governments that you used to curse. What happens in Guantanamo was a historical embarrassment to America and its values. It's interesting, this was in 2002 when he wrote this. We didn't find out about a lot of the torture in Iraq until later. So he's talking about previous stuff. So he just goes on to say, basically and says, don't support it. We call you to stop supporting Israel and your support of the Indians in Kashmir, the Russians against the Chechens, and to also cease supporting the Manila government against the Muslims in southern Philippines. We also advise you to pack your luggage and get out of our lands. Sixthly, we call upon you to end your support of the corrupt leaders in our countries. We also call you to deal with us and interact with us on the basis of mutual interests and benefits, rather than policies of subdual, theft, and occupation, and not to continue your policy of supporting the Jews because this will result in more disasters for you. If you fail to respond to all these conditions, and prepare for fight with the Islamic nation. And he goes on, but I just wanted to point out those particular points, which I think that some of those points and why some of the TikTokers, this is trending on TikTok, is because some of those points are valid. And then there are other things that, I would absolutely not want the country to be run under Sharia law. But I think this is why what this is pointing out, and I think what TikTokers are pointing out, and I think what the trend in US politics is pointing out in general is a shift towards America first policies. Because when you read this letter, you say, okay, he's saying, look, you're spending all your energy and time bombing the crap out of us. You're a hypocrite saying, oh, we're spreading democracy and freedom and we're the good guys. And meanwhile, you're killing all these kids and you're occupying lands and you're torturing people. And he says, so so when you read this, a lot of people could say, why don't we just stick to our own selves? Why do we have to pay attention to any of these people? Like, let's focus on ourselves. And then let's also focus on not allowing the spread of Sharia law into this country. Protect our borders, protect ourselves, hunker down, build ourselves into a fortress. And we're really just weakening ourselves by going all around the world and waging wars and putting our military bases everywhere and provoking this type of aggression towards us. And ultimately creating a desire for people to want to convert to this type of thinking. They read these letters and they say, yeah, good point. I hate them too. Let's rise up. And that hatred, that disdain, because of when we attack, of course, they're going to have that disdain towards us. We have disdain towards them when they attack us. It creates the very insecurity that we claim we're trying to gain. We're trying to gain security, and it creates instead insecurity. I want to play this clip for you. This is Senator Ron Paul. He was he was a member of Congress. Ron Paul, when he was running for president in 2008, and he reaffirmed a lot of what Osama bin Laden said as to why he attacked the United States. Watch this.
Intervention was a major contributing factor. Have you ever read about the reasons they attacked us? They attack us because we've been over there. We've been bombing Iraq for 10 years. We've been in the Middle East. I think Reagan was right. We don't understand the irrationality of Middle Eastern politics. So right now we're building an embassy in Iraq that's bigger than the Vatican. We're building 14 permanent bases. What would we say here if China was doing this in our country or in the Gulf of Mexico? We would be objecting. We need to look at what we do from the perspective of what would happen if somebody else did it to us.
Are you suggesting we invited the 9/11 attack, sir?
I'm suggesting that we listen to the people who attacked us and the reason they did it. And they are delighted that we're over there because Osama bin Laden has said, I am glad you're over on our sand because we can target you so much easier. They've already now, since that time, have killed 3,400 of our men, and I don't think it was necessary.
Wendell, may I make a comment on that? That's really an extraordinary statement. It's an extraordinary statement as someone who lived through the attack of September 11, that we invited the attack because we were attacking Iraq. I don't think I've ever heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11. And I would ask the congressman to withdraw that comment and tell us that he didn't really mean that.
Congressman?
I believe very sincerely that the CIA is correct when they teach and talk about blowback. When we went into Iran in 1953 and installed the Shah, yes, there was blowback. The reaction to that was the taking of our hostages, and that persists. And if we ignore that at our own risk. That if we think that we can do what we want around the world and not incite hatred, then we have a problem. They don't come here to attack us because we're rich and we're free. They come and they attack us because we're over there. I mean, what would we think if we were...
Okay, so, he's there making some really good points. Unfortunately, he did not win that presidential election. But really, again, I want to point out that I do think it's important for us to adopt an America First policy, America First, really just mentality here. We need to. It's existential at this point for these very reasons that we are under attack, that there are forces that want to continue to attack us. Because of our constant building of bases around the world, we are now just draining ourselves dry with money going to these foreign wars that we have that really don't serve America's interests at all. And so we need to adopt an America First mentality and attitude. At the same time, now look, it's true that Osama bin Laden said, I attacked you because you attacked us. Okay, Point taken. So why don't we just stop doing that sort of attacking? It's not, have we ever waged a war and it's actually won? These young people who are on TikTok and all these people are looking at them and thinking that, wow, we've lost an entire generation. These kids are sick. How dare they actually agree with Osama bin Laden? There's something really wrong with them. And maybe it's because this generation of kids, this generation is what, 4 or 5 generations away from World War II vets. So they don't have that, wow, my grandpa was a war hero. He fought in World War II. He was on Omaha Beach and fought in Normandy. He was there, Battle of the Bulge, right? That was my grandpa. A lot of us can say that. But these kids, that's their great-great-grandpa. They are so far removed from that. They're not hearing the stories. They never met that generation, most of them. They don't have anything to do with it. All they see is American wars being waged around the world with absolutely no outcome that is beneficial. We haven't won any wars. We're not spreading democracy. We're ruining everything that we touch. And that's what they're seeing. So, of course, they're reading a letter from Osama bin Laden. They're sitting there saying, hey, idiots, try something new. Hey, idiots, the old Lindsey Graham guard of the world and now the new Nikki Haley's that are still marching in those same pathways, saying this is not going to work and we need to stick to ourselves. This is why America First mentality has risen and why it's absolutely necessary. So that is what the young kids are saying, because they just haven't seen any American wars actually produce any positive results. And when we see then, if we do see an ideology rising up that we find to be dangerous, the desire to separate, to end the separation of church and state and instead to bring them together, to bring Sharia law here on our shores, then we can hunker down and battle that when it's actually a threat on our shores, rather than trying to battle all these things that are not on our shores, thinking, well, they might come to our shores. Well, they're certainly coming to our shores if we keep battling them out. And I think that's the lesson that many of us would like certain people to learn so that we can move on and actually build a better country.